Minister Yair Lapid, and I really, things happen for a reason.
Yes.
And the fact is that I came from Miami and said I don't want to leave Miami. I love it. And I really enjoyed every minute there. But there was a reason why I was brought back to Israel to be part to complete my dream. The Abraham Accords, peace between Israel and Arab countries, are a special thing. It changed the way that Israel looks at the Middle East. It changed the way that the Middle East looks at Israel. When people will look back in the year 2020, in 20 or 30 or 50 years, I know COVID will be the main issue. But the second thing will be this turning point in the Middle East that changes this area from a region of war and conflict to a region of peace and prosperity. And it will take time. It's a slow process. Other countries have their own rhythm, but this year, the year 2020 will be the year of change. The year that the peace or the change of the way this entire region looks. And there's so many things I can tell you about the peace, but I want to give two examples. I told Pastor Mark that, and I mentioned it, there are 17 daily flights between Israel and the UAE. In the first year after signing the peace agreement between Israel and the UAE, over 1 million Israelis visited Dubai. And I want to compare it to the year before. How many Israelis visited the UAE before the year before the signing of the agreement? Zero. It can basically it's hard to find an Israeli that hasn't been there or isn't planning on being there, going there. The second example of how special is this peace is the way that other countries look at it. So there are Arab countries and Muslim countries that are looking at the peace, the Abraham Accords, trying to decide when to take the step forward. But there are countries that are looking at it as a huge potential. One of the examples for that was an event that took place while President Biden, the President of the United States, was here in Israel 5 months ago. Among a lot of other events that he made, he participated in a summit that's called I2U2. It sounds like one of the robots from Star Wars, I know. It's not. I2U2 is a group of 4 countries. 2 of them starts with an I, Israel and India, and 2 of them starts with a U, United States and the United Arab Emirates. This group of 4 countries represent 2 billion people, especially India and the United States, because Israel and the UAE together they have 10 million. But they are the biggest economy in the world and the biggest democracy in the world that are joining 2 small countries in the Middle East. And why is that so important to them? Because in a way, this connection between the UAE and Israel is a new canal of Suez. It opens a door to Europe from one side and to Asia from the other side. It creates opportunity for so many countries to join in and be part of the prosperity of the Middle East, of changing the way people live in this region. In the last 2.5 years, we signed over 65 agreements with those countries that we signed. I remember I told Pastor Mark when I was in Miami that when my kids were younger and they asked me what do I do for a living, I told them that I work in construction. First of all, because I think it's cool, and second, because it's hard to explain what does a diplomat do. It's still hard for me to explain. But in a way, I do work in construction. I build bridges. I build bridges between people, between culture, between economies, between universities, and those bridges, every one of these agreements that we sign is a bridge.
Yes.
That people can walk from one side to another. People can cooperate. People can meet each other. And the best way to achieve peace is by getting people together. So every one of those Israelis that visited the UAE is an ambassador of Israel. And everyone he meets in the UAE gets to know an Israel that they never had a chance to know. They never had a chance to be in touch with. The Avraham Accords also gave me an opportunity to be a world record holder. In the first anniversary of the Avraham Accords, we created a challenge, or actually my team created a challenge for me, under the title of Talking Peace. I gave 99 interviews to 99 countries around the world.
Oh my word.
In 15 straight hours.
Oh my word.
We started in New Zealand and we ended it in San Francisco, and we gave the word of peace to the world. We celebrated peace. So this is still a world record. If anyone wants to beat it, I challenge everyone to talk about peace. In the last 6 months, actually, as I told you, I was a diplomat. I am a diplomat for the last 22 years. And 6 months ago, Foreign Minister Yair Lapid became the Prime Minister in Israel. He asked me to join him, and in the last 6 months, I was part of his team at the Prime Minister's office. Actually, today was my first day back in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Those last few months were amazing. We had a visit of President Biden to Israel. We signed an agreement with Lebanon. It's not a peace agreement, but it's a first step towards it. We visited the General Assembly of the UN with an historic speech by the Prime Minister, and we started different projects that will bring prosperity to the people of Israel and will build bridges to other countries as well, and I hope in the near future we'll see those fruits around here. I came back home to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs today. I will be the spokesperson of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs again, starting actually today. And I'm looking forward to continuing this work and to be part of the history that Israel makes in the Middle East. The best part. I arrived in Miami in February of 2016. My first weekend in Miami, I was invited to a church in Cooper City.
Wow.
For an event for Holocaust survivors. It sounds weird. Holocaust survivors in a church. But I didn't say no. I went there and I met my best friend, my soulmate.
Yep.
And it was love at first sight. I'm not joking. Because we visited the church before, we met the Holocaust survivors that were there, an emotional event, and then Pastor Mark went and gave his speech. And I told him before that when I left Miami 4 years later, I said, if there was 1 minute in my life that I thought of becoming Christian, is that minute because I wanted to be part of this congregation, to be part of the family of Pastor Mark. And it's still there. His devotion to his congregation, the love and support that he gives all over the world. And we've talked when he was in Haiti, we've talked when he was in Ukraine, we talked when he was in Brazil, I think as well, spreading love and bringing help to different people. You're very lucky to be part of his mission to Israel, because visiting Israel for the first time with him must be a divine experience.
Yes. Yes.
I'm blessed to be part of your congregation, and if there's anything I can, or any question you want to ask, or anything you want to share about your visit, I would love to hear from you. I think they want dessert more than I do. Yes.
What countries would you say might be the closest to actually joining the Avrahamic works?
It's a good question. I don't know. There are a few. Actually, Israel is in touch in a non-formal way with different countries in the Middle East. Almost every country in the Middle East. And every country has its own reading. I think that without saying that it's going to be the next one, Saudi Arabia is definitely the most important one. And there are signs that Saudi Arabia is changing. It's a slow change. The Middle East is a traditional region, and it will take time. But definitely, I think that the Abraham Accords, one of the things they changed, the perspective they changed is, a lot of people thought that the Middle East is divided between Muslims and Jews, or Muslims or non-Muslims. And actually the division doesn't go that way. The Middle East is divided between two groups, extremists and moderates. People who want a better future for their kids, and people that want looking for conflicts and wars. And for as long as the moderates stick together and stand by each other, the extremists won't win. And that this division is very important to understand, because on one side you have leaders like the leaders of the UAE and Bahrain and Morocco that said, we want better future to our kids. We want peace, stability, prosperity. And on the other side, there are terror organizations and countries that are led by Iran. So we want to bring war and conflict and violence to this area. And the question is, which side will win? The answer is very short. The people who want peace will win, because peace eventually always wins. And I think this is the main message we're sending to our neighbors. From the Declaration of Independence, back in 1948, in the middle of the independence war of Israel, Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion said, we are looking to live in peace and prosperity with all our neighbors in the Middle East. This was a vision that it's not just a part of the Declaration of Independence, this is the spirit of Israel. We want to live in peace with our neighbors. We want to be part of making the Middle East a better place for all its inhabitants. And I think in the last few years we took a few steps towards this goal.
Any other questions?
Yes, I do have a question. Two-part question. First, political. Second, spiritual.
Loud so they can all hear me.
I wanted to know, in your opinion, in recent time, who was the most pro-Israeli American president? And secondly, what was the spiritual significance for moving the embassy, the American embassy, from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem?
I won't fall into this trap.
He's a diplomat.
I would say Israel has the relationship between Israel and the United States are a pillar of our national security. The most important thing for Israel is the bipartisan support between Israel and the United States. The threat that we have in the United States is that the case for Israel becomes a partisan issue. The real friends of Israel will try to get coalition around the case of Israel and not make it their own. Because there are Democrats administrations and Republican administration, the support for Israel should stay the same for all. The significance of I remember we celebrated the move of the embassy to Jerusalem in the church in Spokesperson. And I said there, and that at first I didn't understand what's the importance. Why should we care about the move of an embassy? We know that Jerusalem is our capital. It was our capital from day one. Actually, it's been our capital for the last 3,000 years. So, who cares about one embassy or another embassy? We know where our heart is. But there is a significance. It's a message. It's a gesture. And it's a gesture that actually sends a message not only to the people of the United States that the moving of the embassy in recognition of Jerusalem as our capital, but a message that in order to achieve peace, we have to achieve the truth. Peace cannot be based on a lie. If someone thinks that we can achieve peace by ignoring the truth, but lying to ourselves and to our fellow nations, this is not a good base for peace. The only way to achieve peace is by saying, this is us, Israel is here. Jerusalem is our capital. It will continue to be our capital, forever and ever.
Yes.
And it will never change. And if the other sides will not accept it, there will be no peace. Never. Because it doesn't matter if they sign a piece of paper, if they don't understand the importance of the city of Jerusalem to the existence of the state of Israel, to the reason that the state of Israel was created, there will never be peace. I'm not going into politics, but I said the only way to achieve peace is by putting everything on the table. And one thing that will never change is that Jerusalem will be the capital of Israel and will continue to be the heart of the Jewish people and the people that support Israel around the world.
To answer part of your question, I had the privilege of being in Washington, D.C. with Lior Haiat, and we were both lobbying both sides of the aisle and trying to gather support for Israel. So that was a great honor that we got to share together. Questions?
Yes.
I read where the Palestinians have attacked Israel, the Israelis, over 4,000 times since the start of 2022. That must be a lot of concern to you and your country. Do you have specific strategies to deal with these set of persons who continuously attacking the country?
Israel is a miracle. It was created, the fact that the state of Israel was created back in 1948, I think it's the biggest miracle of all.
Yes.
But it's not just one miracle. Miracles happen in Israel almost on a daily basis. We used to say that God is everywhere, but talking to God from Israel is a local phone call. But the fact is that if you look at Israel back in 1948 and you look at Israel today, it's unbelievable to see the change. Back in 1948, Israel was a small, very poor country, under attack by 6 enemies, 6 armies, with a military and security crisis and the economical crisis, and with refugees coming from the Holocaust after going through hell and back. And in 75 years, almost 75 years, we've become a world power.
Yes.
Obviously, military world power, and I'll get to that in a minute, but an economical world power, a scientific world power, a technology world power. I think each and every one of you use Israeli technology on a daily basis. Most of you don't even know that it is. If you have a cell phone, you already use an Israeli technology. But every hospital in the world, including in Arab countries, including in countries that don't have diplomatic relations with Israel, they use Israeli technology to save lives. We bring water to deserts, technology that was created here. Security is a main issue for us. We invest a lot in that. And it's true, on the other side, there are a lot of people that want to harm us. But we are doing a lot in order to prevent it. In the last month, there were a lot of attacks against Israelis. The Israeli army, including with other units of agencies, are doing their best in order to get to the terrorists before they get to us. It's an ongoing challenge. We mostly win, not all the time. We have one of the strongest armies in the world. But the strength of the Israeli army is not based on a tank, or an airplane, or a jet, or a missile. It's based on a belief that there is no other option. If we won't defend ourselves, no one will come to help us. You know, I've talked about the special relation between Israel and the United States. But there is one thing that Israel never asked the United States to do: to fight our battles. We do that ourselves. We are actually one of the only countries in the world, or the allies of the United States, that never asked for American soldiers to be on our soil. We do our fighting ourselves, and we do that because we understand there is no second option. There is only one time we lose a war. So if we don't defend ourselves well, we won't get a second chance. And I think this is the spirit that keeps us over our enemies. I do believe that the way to fight it in the long term is by achieving peace. Hopefully the other sides will understand that by achieving or taking the road for peace, they will achieve much more than trying to defeat us by war.
Yes, yes.
Please.
Well, let me start by saying thank you for taking the time to greet us all and honor us with your presence.
Yes.
You know, you could have been anywhere, but you accepted the invitation of Dr. Pastor Alba.
It wasn't an invitation, I forced him. I had no choice.
While he was introducing you, he reported that now not only we have visited Israel, we have become also ambassadors. So in a 1 minute elevator pitch, what could we say about Israel if we were to become ambassadors?
I think the most important thing is to tell people, look at the reality of Israel. Come and visit us. I think Israel has about 400 diplomats around the world. It's not much. We do a lot of noise, but we're just less than 5% of the number of ambassadors or diplomats that the United States have. The best ambassador of the United States is Israel is the state of Israel itself. In order to really see what's going on here, you have to come. And once you came here, send a message to your friends, to your neighbors, to your students, to your professors. Israel is just like us. It does what it takes to make the lives of the Israelis better, tries to achieve peace, and tries to defend itself. And everything Israel does is in order to defend the citizens of Israel against terrorism, like any other democracy would do, trying to make the life of the citizen better like any other democracy would do, and try to achieve peace with its neighbor like any other democracy would do. It's not a coincidence that Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East. When we're talking about values, this is the most important thing. When you look at the values of Israel, it's the same values that the United States has. When you look at the values of the neighborhood, of the countries around us, those are different values. Some of the countries, they put death over life, while Israel puts life over death. We chose to live in the Middle East with our neighbors and not to fight them. But if they do decide to fight us, we'll defend ourselves like any other democracy would do. And I think this is the most important thing. Don't try to look at Israel from away or from far and say, I would have done the same thing. That's not true. That every country that would have stand against the same challenges that Israel stands would have done the same thing. And some of the countries have done a lot more violence against a lot less threats. So I think the main message is Israel does what it has to do like any other democracy the world would have done.
There's a misconception in the States that, like, when we were coming now, we would tell people, we're going to Israel. And they would say, oh wait, but Israel's not safe. And obviously we're going to spread the word that it is safe, but what can governments do to abolish that misconception?
I think that this is the main problem, and I would, as a spokesperson, I know that. People, when they see Israel on the news, they only see conflict and war. Israel is one of the safest places around the world. And I told my friends here, I'm half Brazilian. and I, especially during the World Cup, I take it with a lot of pride. But when you talk about Brazil, no one thinks that Brazil isn't safe. A lot of people go and visit Brazil and say, this is a beautiful place, and it is. But a lot of the places that you visit in Brazil are not as safe, especially not comparing to Israel. It's a misconception. And the way to defeat it is by educating about it. There are, basically, you can walk around any town in Israel, any city and town in Israel, anytime, day or night, and feel safe. A lot safer than a lot of the places that I've lived in the world and even in the United States. It's a misconception. Israel is a safe place. We do have a conflict, but the conflict does not affect the day-to-day life, the level that how people feel safe in Israel. And I'll say more, if you compare it to other countries in the world by comparing violence and comparing places that don't have this terrorist threat, have a lot more violence than the situation in Israel.
Good answer.
Yes.
Statements and a question. For me, one of the most moving things on this trip was my visit to the Holocaust Museum, which you know about the Holocaust, but for whatever reason, this trip, like watching the fact that the ships were turned away by all the countries and they were nowhere for it broke my heart. And I kind of understand the desperation why Israel has to be in a position where Israelis, no matter what happens in the future, has the ability to come home, that they have a place and you have a place to be where you can never be in this position again. But the question I have is, Jerusalem is there, the move for Jerusalem, and they're all praying for peace for Israel, but the plan to rebuild the temple and all that, how do you anticipate doing this in peace?
Well, Got me there. I didn't see it coming.
That's a great question.
I'll start by talking a little bit about the Holocaust, because I think when you said it's one of the most important parts of the visit was the Holocaust Museum, it really should be, because it explains a lot about Israel. And I'll tell you, I spoke about my Brazilian side of the family. I'll speak about my mother's side of the family. They came from Lithuania. My grandfather immigrated from Lithuania to Israel 100 years ago. He was a Zionist. He left his family behind and he immigrated to a small place called Petah Tikva, and he built his house, which my mother still lives in that same house. And step by step, he brought all his brothers and sisters to Israel. And they all lived in the same street. All but one. He was an older brother. He already had family. He said coming to Israel was too much of a measure. And he died in the Holocaust with his entire family. The only thing that saved my grandfather and my grandmother from the Holocaust was Zionism. The fact that they could come here to Israel before it's happened. This is the only way we can save the lives of the people, the Jewish people. Because people would say, well, the Holocaust was once, it can only happen once. No, it's not. We see a rise in anti-Semitism all over the world. In the last few days, there's a American singer, rapper that talks about Hitler as a role model, and talks about how Jews control the world. This is exactly how it started in Germany. And people said it will never happen in Germany because Germany is such a cultural place. And it ended up, if you've been to the Holocaust Museum, you saw how it ended up. So the only way when we say never again is to keep Israel safe in order to give the Jewish people around the world a safe haven. A place which they can, no matter what happens, no matter where the boat goes, there will be one port that will accept them, no matter what. Regarding the third temple, I'm not an expert, really. I'm not I think that for me, in a personal level, the state of Israel is the third temple. This creation, a temple is not a building, it's a spiritual thing. And in order to build the third temple here in Israel, we have to achieve peace. It's not how do you achieve peace with the temple. Peace in Israel is the third temple. Whether we'll build a building with bricks and stones and gold or not, it doesn't matter, because the fact is that in this land of miracles, we gathered Jews after 2,000 years from all over the world to come together. This is what we've been dreaming of. No building can replace this, the dream of the Jewish state again. So it's a personal thing. I think that a hope for a third temple, it's a spiritual hope, and everyone can look at it in a different way. The fact is that you could go to Jerusalem today. You can visit the Western Wall. A Muslim can visit their mosques, and Christian can go to the churches, all in the same city of Jerusalem. This is it. This is what Jerusalem is all about. You know, there are a lot of things, there are a lot of questioned about the name Jerusalem, Yerushalayim. One of the things that they said that Yerushalayim is the city of peace, Ir Shalom. And the fact is that each and every person of faith can come and worship his faith, his own way in the city of peace is the way this city should live. This is the way that God wanted it. That no matter what your way of worship, this is the way to do it. This is the place to do it.
Does Netanyahu have more support this year than he did last year to build a coalition?
Yes, the elections we had in the last 3.5 years, 5 rounds of elections. When I was in the first 2 rounds, I was still in Miami, and I told people that Israelis are addicted to democracy. Sometimes we need 2 doses of democracy a year. I think we got to the place where we were overdosed with democracy. But on the other end, most of the people around the world don't live in a democracy. Most of the people around the world never had a chance to vote in a free elections. We should never take it for granted. We live in democracy. We understand the power of democracy. Most of the people around the world, when they look at us, they envy the fact that we can go once every 4 years, or twice every year in Israel and vote. The fact is that the Israeli society is divided. It's not just right and left, it's different stripes of politics. I think that this division, we can see it in other places around the world. In the last elections that took place in November 1st, Netanyahu won, or Netanyahu and his supporters, because his party, Likud, with 3 other parties, got about 52% of the voters. This means that he can build a strong coalition that would probably stay for the whole term or most of the term. And this is exactly what he's doing today, is building coalition. The Israeli democracy, or the system, is different than the bipartisan system in the United States. There was never a government in Israel that was with only one party. And it's an important issue, because in order to build a coalition, you have to get other people and other ideas under your umbrella, under your leadership. That means that you have to take into consideration other projects, other ideologies, and to be a better leader, because you don't just take your ideology forward, you think about other people as well. So this is what's going on now, is actually building this coalition with these different partners. And it seems, again, out of the 120 members of the Israeli parliament, the Knesset, he has 64. It doesn't seem much, but in Israeli politics, it's a huge gap. The 64 against 56, it's enough in order to build a strong coalition.
One more question.
Let me say thank you for coming, and thanks for your invaluable input. Most of the questions I had was already addressed. But if there's one thing that we as a body of believers could do for you and your country, what would that be?
Keep praying for peace in Israel. And peace for Jerusalem. I remember, and again, those are things that I told in the church. When I was in the army, most of my service I was in South Lebanon. At that time, in the 90s, Israel held a few army bases in the south of Lebanon in order to prevent the terrorists from Hezbollah to get to our border. And I don't think you had a chance to visit the border with Lebanon now, but we were there about a few miles into Lebanon, and when we looked south, we saw the lights of the towns and cities and kibbutz on the border, and we knew that we are defending Israel, physically defending Israel. And we felt that we are all alone. Group were 25 of us, young people between the ages of 18 and 22, 23. And we felt that this is it. That's all we got. And our home is about a few miles south. And when I came to the church in Cooper City and then in different other places, I understood the support that Israel has around the world. This support comes in many ways. It's by supporting Israel or pro-Israeli politician, and it's by visiting Israel, and it's by buying Israeli products, and by fighting against discrimination and against anti-Semitism. Right. And it's by praying as well. So keep praying for the peace in Jerusalem, because this is our goal as well.
Yes.
If there's one thing I'll ask you to do is keep Israel in your heart,
Yes.
and keep us in your prayers.
Yes.
Thank you.